Now we go to the second architect we'll talk about today, and that is, this time we go to Great Britain, and this Gilbert Scott, an interesting architect whose name is difficult for me because he came from a family. There are several Gilbert Scotts, all important architects, and I still have to digest, all this information about these Gilbert Scotts, because they are all excellent architects, but they are not one architect, they are several. So Sir Gilbert Scott, OMRAFRIBA, my God, this is Great Britain, was born in 1880 and died, as I said, on February 8th, 1960. So, 62 years ago, he died. Was a British architect known for his work on the New Bodleian Library, Cambridge University Library, Lady Margaret Hall, Oxford Battersea Power Station, Liverpool Cathedral, and designing the iconic red telephone box, which is indeed iconic. Scott came from a family of architects. He was noted for his blending of Gothic Gothic tradition, with modernism, making what might otherwise have been functionally designed buildings into popular landmarks. So, functionally designed buildings he transformed into popular landmarks. This was the man. So he died 62 years ago. He was almost our contemporary. Not like Carlo Rinaldi, who lived in the 17th century. Gilbert Scott was indeed almost, or we were almost I would have been his contemporary. Well, I actually was when I was a child. Some drawings. This is a remarkable building, but he didn't actually design it. It was designed by an engineer, and I understood the clients invited him, the architect, to, create, to bring some beauty, some aesthetical values into the work of the engineer. And the building is considered a great landmark now in Great Britain, and even Pink Floyd used this building on the cover of the album Animals. So these are some drawings by this Gilbert Scott. I say this Gilbert Scott because there were several. Gilles Gilbert Scott. I hope I pronounced the first name correctly. I'm not sure actually. Some design of furniture in pencil on perhaps yellow tracing paper. Now the Liverpool Cathedral. This is, I made presentations now for 7 years, for 2 years almost online, and I didn't know that the great Liverpool Cathedral was actually designed by him. I don't know if he began it. It was begun in 1903. So he was 23 years old at that time. He was born in 1880. So it took 57 years to be completed. Now, what's here? Completed posthumously in 1978. So I don't know what is that, 1903, 1960. I guess he worked on the cathedral for 57 years, 57 years on this building, the Liverpool Cathedral, which was completed 18 years after he died. And it is a good building, but it's true. You wonder, I mean, you look at it and you say, how, this building must be at least 600 years old, 700 years old. It's actually, not even 50 years old. I mean, if we consider not when it was begun, the construction, but when it ended, if indeed ended, because usually cathedrals are built, during long periods of time, and the construction never actually ends completely. Now, this kind of building being built in the 20th century, you wonder, but then St. John the Divine Cathedral in New York also, in the 20th century, there was a lot of work done. I don't know if it was not begun at the end of the 19th century. Anyway, you will see that he did some other works. Here he remained within the architectonic language of the Gothic. But I think the building is a good building. It has strength. It is vivacious almost. It's a powerful building. And again, this is the cathedral in Liverpool that this architect, Gilbert Scott, apparently started, but he was 23 years old. I have a hard time to believe that at 23 he won the competition for this cathedral. And in that competition, there were architects like Charles Mackintosh, and we are going to see his project a little bit later. I mean, an image of his project. It's a good, in my opinion, it's a good work by Gilbert Scott. Even if he did his rendering, I found it, on Google Images. And it seems to have the spirit of the built work. I think it's impressive, even the rendering. Even if you are not, even if you are a modern, I think you can sympathize with, with the grandeur, majestic, building that is rendered here. Gilbert Scott. Now, we know that in contemporary cities, a cathedral is dwarfed most of the time by much taller buildings, sometimes even much bigger buildings. But here in Liverpool, it seems around it, there aren't really, competing buildings in terms of size. As a signature element, if I can say so, this architect loves towers, a strong vertical accent, like at the Tate Gallery in London, which was, received some works by Herzog and de Meuron, and we are going to see the work a little bit later. A fine cathedral by this architect, no doubt. This is the competition entry of Charles Mackintosh, and he didn't win it. Gilbert Scott won it. Now, who knows how this building would have been if Charles Mackintosh built it? We don't know. I don't know if because of this loss, Charles Mackintosh decided to dedicate his last years of his life to painting. But it's possible that, losing a major competition could have a depressive effect on an architect, unless that architect is Jean Nouvel. I've heard Jean Nouvel saying that he was the architect who lost the largest number of competitions in the history of architecture. I don't think this is true. I mean, I don't know, but there were many architects who lost many competitions. If I humbly could count myself in between them, I lost some too. And you participate with all your efforts and with with all your inspiration and so on, and you like what you do, and then when the results come, you realize that you didn't move anyone in the jury. Now, what is interesting, there is a telephone box in the Liverpool Anglican Cathedral, in the cathedral. Could it be? I mean, I still have a hard time to believe that inside the cathedral there is a telephone box, but that's the information I found. So, it's kind of funny, the wording. A K6 telephone box in the Liverpool Anglican Cathedral, both designed by Gilles Gilbert Scott, both the cathedral and the telephone box. And you know this telephone box because it's almost a symbol of Great Britain. He designed it in a competition, I think, Gilles Gilbert Scott. And I'm going to read a little bit about it. So Scott's most ubiquitous design was for the General Post Office. He was one of 3 architects invited by the Royal Fine Arts Commission to submit designs for new telephone kiosks. The invitation came at the time Scott was made a trustee of Sir John Soane's museum. His design was in the classical style, topped with a dome reminiscent of the mausoleum Soane designed for himself in St. Pancras Old Churchyard in London. It was the chosen design and was put into production in cast iron as the GPO's kiosk number 2 or K2. In 1932, the design was expanded to include a posting box and 2 stamp vending machines as kiosk number 4 or K4. Later designs adapted the same general look for mass production. The Jubilee kiosk, introduced by King George V as Silver Jubilee in 1935 and known as the K6, the one that we saw, eventually became a fixture in almost every town and village. And this is thanks to Gilles Gilbert Scott. Here is another picture with several of them, one near the other. And indeed, it is a striking presence in any town and village in Great Britain. I hope they still have them. I actually, to be honest with you, I miss the telephone, the public telephones. And, if there were, kiosks, if we are to call them so, like here, maybe even better. I think something is lost, because of this maddening mobile phone, which seems to be so, insinuating in our lives that we cannot live without it. But somehow the booth, the public telephone booth, had this public dimension, it belonged to everyone. Now, of course, there were moments of exasperation when you had to use a coin and the coin would disappear inside the machine because of maybe some fraudulent attempts to get some cash, metallic cash from it. But I don't know, I miss it. I miss a public telephone, this relying on your own little mobile phone that everybody has. Practically human beings who are made by God or by nature with 2 hands, they deprive most people of the use of 1 hand, because on that hand, the mobile phone is king. So essentially most people today have only 1 functioning hand or arm, because the other one is occupied holding its majesty, the mobile phone, which I dislike immensely. In fact, I hate it, but I cannot live without it. If you have to transfer money from your account to another account or something, you receive SMS, if you don't have a public phone, you cannot do it. I think if you don't have a mobile phone, you do not exist. It's very possible if the police asks you, show us your mobile phone, and you say, sorry, sir, I don't have one, you'll be arrested on the spot. Now, Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church in Kensington, another, I would say, impressive building by Gilles Gilbert Scott. Massive, big, austere. it's not bad, you know. And yeah, I think he was able to marry some kind of medievalism with modernity. This building, as opposed to the Liverpool Cathedral, does show some obvious signs of modernity. Well, you know, but even the interior, you know, this is not how they built churches or cathedrals in the Middle Ages. Gilles Gilbert Scott, another big church designed by him. Now we arrive at this very interesting work, but I will read a little bit about it. The Battersea Power Station. In 1930, the London Power Company engaged Scott as consulting architect for its new electricity generating station at Battersea. The building was designed by the company's chief engineer, Leonard Pearce, and Scott's role was to enhance the external appearance of the massive architecture. He opted for external brickwork, put some detailing on the sheer walls, and remodeled the four-cornered chimneys so that they resembled classical columns. Battersea Power Station opened in 1933, but disused since 1982. Remains one of the most conspicuous industrial buildings in London. At the time of its opening, the Observer, though expressing some reservations about details of Scott's work, called it one of the finest sites in London. In a poll organized by the Architectural Review in 1939 to find what lay people thought of were Britain's best modern buildings, Battersea Power Station was in second place behind the Peter Jones building. And here it is. And I think it's an excellent, imposing presence, you know, architecturally speaking. Interesting also the strategy used. An engineer designed it, I mean, conceived it, and then the architect was called later on to bring in some so-called architectural sensitivity. Usually we employ the services of engineers the other way around. The architect creates the building and then we invite the engineer to, you know, to receive some, you know, expert, you know, contribution from them of a technical nature. But I am asking why couldn't we actually do buildings and maybe competitions as well, where we allow first the engineers to think of responding to the challenge of a certain program, and then the architect steps in, kind of a, you know, a guest to add some aesthetical you know, value to the project. Why couldn't this be possible? In fact, I invited, you probably know, those of you who participated in these presentations for a longer time. We had two friends, engineers, and quite remarkable engineers. Mahadev Raman was the director of OVR America for many years, about 15 years, and now is a trustee of the largest engineering firm in the world. And Bruce Desinger, who also a structural engineer at the same firm. And because we are in friendly terms, I invited them to do a competition together. And I told them, you start the project, you conceive the project, you will be the main violin, so to speak, of the project. And I could step in maybe with some you know, just like Gilbert Scott or Gilles Gilbert Scott did for this project. Allow the engineer to act creatively at the very beginning, and then the architect comes in and you know, softens a little bit, maybe if it's necessary, the whole project through some, I don't know, some aesthetical gestures. I mean, architectonic gestures. But look, in this case, the result is remarkable. I don't think the laymen were wrong when they chose this building as being the second most important modern building in I don't know if in England or in London, but in both cases, it's a lot. So I guess Gilles Gilbert Scott worked on these columns, and indeed they are designed. You can tell that here there was an architect, and maybe this reversal of roles created this. I would call it a masterpiece, striking building because of it, of the reversal. That the engineer was the main force, so to speak. Here is an image from The Animals by Pink Floyd. You see the flying pig here in the sky. And maybe after my presentation, you would be interested to listen to that album by Pink Floyd. Well, the fact that Pink Floyd chose this building to visualize, you know, this album is not so surprising when we consider that 3 of the 4, I think there were 4 members of Pink Floyd, studied architecture. They even met in the architecture school. They studied for 2-3 years. And then they decided to use their time better, and they became the famous group, Pink Floyd. But they studied architecture, and you know, this visualization of this particular album makes it almost clear. Here it is, Pink Floyd Animals, with a building where, you know, Gilles Gilbert Scott was the embellishing architect, if I am to call him so, maybe not totally in appropriate terms. But the cooperation between the engineer and the architect in this case was brilliant. An iconic building indeed for London and for Great Britain, and for Pink Floyd as well. Now we know who contributed to this building, thanks to this commemoration, because he died on the 8th of February, 1960. Now another church built between 1910 and 1936, so while he was working for the Liverpool Cathedral, he received other commissions because that was a very famous building he was working on. And of course, you know, other clients showed up. And here it is, another church built by Sir Gilles Gilbert Scott. I personally prefer the previous building, where the modernism of the engineer's work is more obvious and more potent. But some touches of modernism are present here too, somehow. Anyway, what is interesting about this church is the narrowness of the nave. And I think this could be an interesting idea, you know, to make cathedrals or churches very narrow and tall. Now, the William Booth Memorial Training College, it's a college, but it's a college, but with a sacred function, so to speak. You see the cross there. And some important buildings by him have this, you know, signature element, so to speak. He was not the only architect, but you can see this quite phallic tower here, and he uses it in other cases as well. At Tate in London as well. The architects love towers. What can you say? What can you do about it? Now, I can't even pronounce Weymouth. Yes, I can. Weymouth Street. It's a residential building. It's here. It's this building. I think it's good. You know, at least it doesn't have those obsessive horizontal windows of you know, Corbusian influence. And the windows at least refer to a certain tradition of, you know, dividing the rectangle of the window in smaller parcels. And I like this, you know, this maybe it's a traditionalist gesture, but somehow I'm subjective. I prefer this kind of windows to large, you know, just one piece of glass. Now the tower, of course, we just talked about towers, tower at the Cambridge University Library, and the tower it is, not very different from what we saw previously. Interesting that at Cambridge, you know, you look behind this building and you almost see rural life. You know, I wonder if it's still like this. Maybe it's possible, but the trees are as beautiful as ever. And we need badly trees. Now the Bankside Power Station, now Tate Modern, a very important building in London as well, completed in 1963, so 3 years after he died. We have the ubiquitous tower here as well. And tall it is. We'll see also the work of Herzog and de Meuron here. It's an important art gallery here now. We look at the expansion. Well, this is a text that was published before 2016, but it opened officially in 2016. Herzog and de Meuron Tate Modern expansion. They did some work here. I don't know who designed this bridge. Was it Foster? I'm not sure. But the building is good, and Herzog and de Meuron also designed this building here, which we are going to see in a minute in some detail. So they did the work on the building done by Sir Gilles Gilbert Scott, and also they created this building, Herzog and de Meuron. This one was not done by Gilles Gilbert Scott. So here we see them from the side. London. Now the Tate Modern switch house was built by Herzog and de Meuron. Here it is. Here I see a building which seems to be made, designed or built by Sir Richard Rogers. I don't know, but somehow it looks like a building by him. But this is by Herzog and de Meuron. The interior, in my opinion, is less interesting than the exterior. for my taste, a little bit too much grayness, but that's my taste. I prefer the exterior where you have the fine vibration and the impressionism of the skin of the building. If I have to, criticize something, maybe it's the perfection of the work, but I would abstain. Herzog and de Moron. It does matter, if a wall towards the outside, but for both towards inside and outside, has a tactility. If its tectonics are complex, I think it does matter. Okay, now we arrive at the end of this presentation on Scott's work. There are other works which I didn't show, but it's still an homage to him. Scott's grave at Liverpool Cathedral. So he was buried there, near the cathedral, and there is even inside the cathedral is the memorial to Scott, set into the floor beneath the central tower. We remember the Liverpool Cathedral. So beneath the central tower, there is this. 1880, 1960, Sir Gilbert Scott, architect. Bravo to him and to the country and to the city that both appreciated him.